Now, I know as a Bears fan, this scouting report is going to be controversial. Good. Bring it on. Because I don't give a shit. Because every year, you have these players, these prospects, that get incredibly highly rated by the draft media, frankly, teams, fans, draft Twitter, etc. And for the ever-loving life of me, I can't understand why. Jalen Carter kind of falls into that category. I'm not here to say that Jalen Carter sucks. I do not think he sucks. And if I did, you know I would tell you whether you like it or not or agree with it or not. I do not think the young man sucks. However, all of this talk of best player in the draft, generational talent, the fuck are people smoking? Well, you should watch the film. Have you watched? Because to me, there is no way you could watch Jalen Carter's tape these last 2 years, but specifically 2022, and just on the tape alone, before you get to any other concerns involving him, and come away and say, my God, that's a generational talent. My God, that's a multi-time All-Pro and future Hall of Famer. Ain't no goddamn way. What I think this is people seeing some flashes. And to be fair with Jalen Carter, there are incredible flashes. There are some bright moments where you look and say, my God, if he did this all the time, he could be illegal or should be illegal. That's the game-wrecking potential you occasionally see, but very occasionally see, and not as frequently as people like to believe or think. And they fall in love with that, and they miss all of the other crap. Yeah, Jalen Carter, best player in this draft, my ass. Best defensive player in this draft, my freaking ass. And best defensive lineman in this draft, hell to the nah. Ain't no goddamn way. Get real. Now, this is not me calling the shot like I did maybe a few years ago with Robert Nkemdiche, where I said, this is a day 3 talent. He's overrated as shit. There are certain elements here that remind me of that a little bit. Not quite to that degree, though. I certainly see higher upside and better overall play and talent from Jalen Carter. But yeah, I don't get it. Like, obviously the first thing when you watch anything relating to Jalen Carter is you see his initial quickness. This cat is uber explosive. In a 6'3", 315 plus pound frame. Like, he looks like a monster and he gets off the line like a monster. His initial quickness is almost Aaron Donald-like in terms of his ability to penetrate the backfield, to get around the edge of the interior lineman and disrupt the timing of the play. Like, it's there. He's got flashes and moments where he does that. Like, he gets upfield. He can change a play. You look at that physical package in terms of his size, his weight, his quickness, his speed, and you say, man, that's the type of elite physical talent that you should be thinking about taking high. Especially when you combine that with the fact that he can play really powerfully. He's got the strength to bull rush through the line when he's on balance. That's a key caveat there, but when he's on balance, like, he could be potentially devastating on the interior. Or even if you want to play him as a 5 technique in the 3-4, he can be as well. Maybe even more so there. It might be his best position in the NFL. His initial punch with his hands can be violent. He can disengage blocks quickly. Like, so I want to make sure I'm being very clear here. because sometimes comprehension is a problem for folks. I am not saying Jalen Carter sucks. I'm not even saying he's a day 2 or day 3 talent. I might be hedging my bets here a little bit and not going as hard and as extreme as I should. But I still think he's a round 1 talent. But a lot of it matters on situation, scheme, coaching, organizational infrastructure, locker room. Drafting him at the top of the draft, to me, is psychotic behavior, and you're almost asking for trouble. You're almost asking for trouble. Because here's my thing. Some of his weaknesses are just glaring. For a guy that is that quick and explosive, he consistently is late reacting to the snap. Imagine if he better timed his get off from the snap. Now, some guys can get better at that, other guys cannot. And if he doesn't, that's always going to put Jalen Carter as a bit of a disadvantage, which makes it crazy to see, like at Georgia sometimes, how he could still penetrate the backfield like that, and he would get to a late start. Well, that's a concern. You know, we talk about this great prospect in terms of his pass rush ability. And let's be clear here. Generational talents shouldn't finish their college career of over 40 games with 6 fucking sacks. 6! Not in a season for a damn career. You say, well, sacks don't matter. They're not the be-all, end-all. You know what? To some degree, that may be right. However, at some point in time, you want a guy to be able to get the hell home. And he doesn't get the hell home. It looks sexy and great sometimes to see him penetrate the O-line and get into the backfield like that, but a lot of times he just overruns the play. And for such a highly touted prospect, he sure gets put on the ground a lot. My nickname for Jalen Carter is the Turf Monster. When you talk about, hey, great players in the school's history, you put them in a ring of honor or you retire his jersey, they shouldn't fucking do that. What they should do is find a spot on the field, either side of the field, the 12-yard line, rename it the fucking 88-yard line to commemorate how many times Jalen Carter would end up on his fucking belly or his ass during a game. Like he found a goddamn gopher hole and he just couldn't leave it alone. Like you see one play maybe in the first half, because again his conditioning absolutely sucked and we saw that at times throughout the year, consistently. He'd have this great play where he got into the backfield, but of course he didn't make the play because he overran it. So it was a bunch of ado about nothing. He disrupted the timing of it a little bit, that's fine. Then you didn't hear shit about him from several plays, a couple of series. But in that meantime, he's been put on the ground a couple of times. That's not generational talent right there. Get real. I just mentioned his conditioning. It's suspect, and that showed up in the college football playoffs. That showed up when you talk about the pro day. I haven't even gotten to the potential questions about his character and off-the-field decision-making. You know, when Tom McShay was talking about, I think it was, he put out there that there were some character questions about Jalen Carter. And, of course, Twitter overreacted to that and went nuts on it. Character can manifest in a lot of different ways, both good or bad, right? Like somebody could break the law, but be a great person, just make really bad decisions. You see what I mean? Like Jalen Carter could be a really good kid, hardworking young man. And occasionally gets into a snafu here or there with the law. Little too speedy. Little too speed racer with his driving. But that can call into question things like decision making. And what would a young man like this do with potentially $20 or $30 million of guaranteed money in the goddamn bank? And you talk about showing up to his pro day as out of shape as he looked. Like, it's fair to question. And there's some questions about his maturity. And, you know, none of us are really involved with the Georgia program. We don't really know Jalen Carter intimately like that to be able to determine, like, hey, this is absolutely true or this is absolutely false. You just have to go over the reports. But if you hear enough reports about it, typically where there's smoke, there's some type of fire, even if it's smoldering. But, again, I come back to all of this hype for him being a generational talent. 6 career sacks! Bullshit! The only thing he was generational at in Georgia was getting put on his ass. A lot. The turf monster. Call it the fucking 88-yard line down in Georgia. My NFL comparisons for him, I put here a combination of Darrell Russell and Robert Nkemdiche. The dearly departed Darrell Russell. This was a guy that, if you remember, was a typical Al Davis pick coming out of USC. They took him second overall. He was this height, weight, speed monster, and he had a couple of, I think, like 9-10 sack seasons, but then he sort of fizzled out afterwards. There were some drug use issues and other things. I could see Jalen Carter going down that path. Like, the athletic upside is absolutely there. But I could also see the Robert Nkemdiche path of, you think he's one thing because he's been hyped up and you've heard about him for a long time, but then when you pop in the film, you say, holy shit, it's not so much that way. And then you got some off-the-field kind of character concerns there. And like I said, sometimes guys get into the backfield a lot, you're like, man, that's great. But if they don't make a lot happen when they do, you say, oh, team's eventually just going to let them run right by the play and not be bothered with it. They'll scheme around that. I've got Jalen Carter, like I said, as a first-round talent still, because I cannot deny the physical upside is tremendous. But, like, I don't want any part of him with the Bears. I don't like the fit. I don't like the situation. I think if he went to a place like, let's say, Philadelphia, that's a fantastic fit for him. Could learn from veterans, be in a championship culture, not have to be the guy, be able to play with former Georgia teammates like Nakobe Dean and Jordan Davis. That'd be a magnificent situation for him. You know, so there are certain spots. Detroit, I think, would be a really good situation for him. You know, I'd actually be worried because he could go to a place where you've got Aiden Hutchinson, you've got Houston on the edges. They can't really hone in and double team Jalen Carter. Now he could be a bit of a problem. But you know, all these Bears fans that have been talking about, they love to have Jalen Carter there at 9. To me, my approach is much different here. If the Bears drafted Jalen Carter at 9, based off of what the film actually shows and looking at this draft class, Jalen Carter not only is not a steal at pick 9, he would represent a bit of a reach, in my opinion. Not a massive one. And I would understand the thought processes they did ultimately take a swing and pick him. But, you know, if I was a team picking in the top 10, outside of the Eagles, I'd be really, really worried about Jalen Carter. As I understand, you've got the thoughts of what you think he can be, but the reality of who he is right now is vastly different.